I'd been waiting all week for this weekend. In my head, I'd already pictured the two of us sitting across the table, laughing over dinner, or maybe walking hand in hand through the park. So when I brought it up to Ethan, I expected that familiar smile, the one that always softened his face. Instead, his expression was tight, almost heavy. "Lauren, I can't. My dad's really sick. Mom begged me to come help her this weekend," he said, his words dropping like stones. I felt the air leave my chest, my plans dissolving right there in front of me. I searched his eyes, hoping for a flicker of warmth, but they kept darting away, landing everywhere but on me. My voice came out softer than I intended, laced with disappointment I tried to hide. "Oh, I wanted us to have some time together," I said, forcing a small nod. How could I argue with that? If his father was unwell, if his mother needed him, then of course I had to step back. Still, something about the way he delivered the excuse felt too polished, too rehearsed, as if he'd already practiced it. He offered a tight smile then, quick to patch over the awkward silence. "Yeah, and you'll be busy with the painter anyway. It works out." I nodded again, but my stomach twisted. The truth is, it didn't feel like it worked out at all. It felt like he was placing a wall between us, one I wasn't supposed to question. I tried to brush off the unease, telling myself not to overthink. But that faint whisper of doubt had already taken root inside me, and I knew it wasn't going away. The rest of the evening felt heavier than it should have. I kept moving around the house, picking up things here and there, trying to keep busy. But my mind stayed fixed on Ethan's voice, the way it carried that edge of finality. I wanted to believe him, I really did. He'd never given me a reason not to trust him, or at least that's what I told myself. Still, I couldn't shake the hollow feeling that sat in my chest, a feeling I didn't want to name just yet. I tried distracting myself by planning little details for the painter's visit, choosing colors and imagining how fresh the house would look once the work was done. Normally, that would have brought me joy. Instead, I kept replaying Ethan's words, the clipped tone, the way his eyes avoided mine. Was I imagining it? Maybe it was just stress, I reasoned. But deep down, I knew I wasn't the kind of woman who imagined shadows where there were none. Something about his story didn't fit. When I climbed into bed that night, the silence felt too loud. I stared at the ceiling, tracing patterns with my eyes while my thoughts ran wild. I remembered weekends when Ethan used to plan surprises just for us, when he'd look at me like I was the only person in the room. That Ethan felt far away tonight. Instead, I was left with excuses and half smiles. I pulled the blanket tighter, trying to convince myself I was overthinking, but that little voice inside me whispered otherwise, daring me to stay alert. The next morning, I forced a smile as I watched him pack his bag. He moved around the room with practiced ease, tossing in clothes without really looking at me. I offered to make him coffee, and he nodded absently, already scrolling through his phone. That distance between us, once just a faint line, now felt like a canyon. I wanted to reach across, to pull him back into the space we used to share, but I held myself still. Instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and handed him the mug. When he kissed my cheek before leaving, it was quick, almost mechanical, like ticking a box on a checklist. I stood in the doorway, watching his car pull out of the driveway, the morning light spilling across the street. It should have been an ordinary goodbye, but my heart thudded strangely against my ribs. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to quiet it, to stop the wave of doubt building inside me. Was I being dramatic, or had something shifted that I couldn't ignore anymore? I closed the door slowly, leaning against it for a moment, just breathing. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of your own thoughts. I reminded myself of the painter, the chores, the little things that would keep me occupied. But beneath it all, that whisper of unease lingered like a shadow I couldn't chase away. I told myself not to worry, that everything would make sense soon. What I didn't know then was how quickly those whispers would turn into something undeniable. By Saturday evening, the quiet of the house was gnawing at me. I'd kept myself busy all day, shuffling between chores and painter prep, but when the sun dipped low, loneliness settled in. I missed Ethan more than I wanted to admit. So, without overthinking, I picked up my phone and tapped the video call icon. The screen lit up, and after a pause, his face appeared. He looked uneasy, like I'd caught him doing something he hadn't planned to share. "Hi, love," I said with a smile, trying to bridge the distance through the screen. His return smile was tight, almost reluctant. I tried to push past it, keeping my voice light. "Can you show me your parents? I miss them so much." I leaned closer, waiting to see their familiar faces, to hear their voices. For a moment, I imagined his mother's gentle laugh, his father's warm greeting. But instead, Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flickering away from the camera. "They're already asleep," he said after a pause, his tone clipped. "Dad had a tough day. You know how it is." My brow furrowed. "But Ethan, it's only 7 o'clock, I replied, my voice tightening with confusion. He forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "They go to bed early. Don't worry about it." I sat there, phone in hand, my heart sinking just a little. Something about the way he said it, too quick, too dismissive, didn't sit right with me at all. I tried to brush it off, forcing a small laugh as if his excuse made perfect sense. Still, a knot tightened in my stomach. I studied his face on the screen, the way he avoided my eyes, the nervous twitch at the corner of his mouth. He wasn't relaxed like he usually was when we talked at night. No, tonight he seemed trapped, like someone waiting for the conversation to end before something slipped through the cracks. And I couldn't ignore how different that felt. So I leaned into the role of the loving wife, masking my suspicion with sweetness. I asked him about his mom's cooking, about how the neighborhood looked this time of year. He answered, but his words came short and vague, like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together. Every time I laughed or shared something about my day, his responses lagged as if his mind was somewhere else entirely. I knew this version of him, distracted, distant, a shadow of the man I thought I knew. Inside, I battled with myself. Part of me wanted to snap, to demand the truth right then and there. But another part whispered that if I pushed too hard, I'd drive him deeper into whatever he was hiding. So I played along, smiling softly, nodding at his shallow answers, all while my pulse beat faster. The screen reflected his uneasy grin, but behind it, I could sense the weight of a secret pressing hard. And I knew it was only a matter of time before it slipped through. I shifted in my seat, trying to steady my breathing, pretending his excuses didn't rattle me. "Well, tell them I said goodnight," I murmured, watching his eyes flicker to the side of the screen like something was pulling his attention away. That quick glance, that hesitation, it wasn't nothing. My chest tightened, but I forced a soft smile, acting as if I hadn't noticed. Deep down, though, I knew I had. To fill the silence, I started telling him about the painter, about the colors I was considering for the house. It was small talk, the kind couples share when they're apart. But as I spoke, his responses grew more clipped, almost distracted. "That's nice," he muttered, eyes darting again. I wanted to scream at him to look at me, to be present, but I bit my tongue. I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was just beyond the frame. When the call ended, I stared at the black screen long after his face disappeared. My reflection looked back at me, frowning, searching for answers. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just tired, letting doubt cloud my mind. But that whisper inside me, the one that had started when he first gave me that excuse, was louder now. And I knew the truth was closer than I wanted to believe. The next evening, I called him again, telling myself it was just because I missed him. But really, I needed reassurance, something to quiet the storm building in my chest. When his face appeared on the screen, he gave me that same uneasy smile, like a man holding a secret too close. I tried to play it cool, asking about his day, asking if his dad was doing any better. He nodded quickly, his words short, clipped, and just like before, his eyes kept drifting off camera. As he rambled on, I leaned back in my chair, letting his words wash over me while I studied everything else. The pauses, the tension in his jaw, the forced laugh. That's when I heard it. Faint at first, like a whisper carried on the air. My ears sharpened, my body tensing as I leaned closer to the phone. And then, clear as day, a woman's voice cut through the silence. Playful, light, but unmistakably real. "Babe, where's the shampoo you bought me?" she called out. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. My smile froze, every muscle in my body tightening as if the world had tilted off its axis. That wasn't his mother's voice. It wasn't anyone in his family. It was a stranger, and in that moment, I knew the truth I'd been trying not to see. Ethan wasn't where he said he was, and he wasn't alone. My throat went dry, but I forced my voice to sound calm. "What was that, Ethan?" I asked softly, almost too softly, as if giving him a chance to come clean. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then he let out a nervous chuckle. "TV, just the TV," he replied, his tone too quick, too defensive. I stared at him, my lips curved into a tight smile, masking the storm raging inside me. Every instinct screamed at me to shout, to demand the truth, but I swallowed the urge. Instead, I tilted my head, pretending to believe him. "Right. Of course," I said, my words laced with a sweetness I didn't feel. Behind my steady expression, my mind was spinning, piecing together every detail that hadn't added up. The rehearsed excuse, the restless eyes, the clipped tone. And now, her voice. He'd handed me the proof without even realizing it. I kept the conversation going, nodding at his half-hearted answers, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. My pulse hammered in my ears, my palms damp against the phone. I had my answer, even if he thought he'd covered his tracks. He was lying. He was cheating. And the betrayal burned hot in my chest, searing away any doubt I'd clung to. He thought I'd just let it go, but I was already planning my next move. I ended the call a few minutes later, pretending I was tired. The moment the screen went black, I dropped the phone onto the couch and pressed my hands to my face. My chest felt like it was splitting open, the sound of that woman's voice echoing in my ears. I tried to steady my breathing, but the betrayal hit me in waves, sharp, stinging, relentless. All the little cracks in his story had finally split wide open, and now there was no patching them back together. I walked through the house, restless, touching things just to ground myself. The smell of fresh paint clung to the air, the walls newly covered for a future I had planned with him. My fingers brushed the cool surface, and it hit me. I'd been building a home while he was tearing ours apart. The weight of that realization made my knees buckle for a second, but I steadied myself. Pain turned quickly into resolve, hard and cold. I knew I couldn't confront him over the phone. He'd wriggle out of it, lie, spin another excuse. No, I needed something undeniable, something he couldn't escape. And if I played my cards right, he'd expose himself without me ever raising my voice. Standing there in the silence of our painted home, I promised myself. He thought I was blind, but he was about to learn just how much I could see. The next morning, I woke up with my decision already made. I wasn't going to sit in that house waiting for more lies to trickle through a phone screen. If Ethan thought I'd stay quiet, he was wrong. So I canceled the painter, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to his parents' house. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every mile, my heart a mix of dread and determination. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. When I rang the bell, his parents greeted me with surprise but warmth, as they always had. His mother's smile was genuine, his father's handshake firm. For a moment, guilt flickered inside me. I hated dragging them into this storm, but they deserved to know the truth too. I put on my best concerned face and asked gently, "How are you feeling? Ethan told me you were really sick." His father blinked, confusion etched across his features. "Sick? No, dear. I'm perfectly fine. We haven't seen Ethan in weeks," he said, his tone both puzzled and firm. My stomach twisted as the final piece slid into place. There it was, undeniable proof, spoken so simply it almost felt cruel. I forced a smile, nodding as if his words hadn't just burned a hole straight through my chest. "Thank you. That explains a lot," I murmured. Inside, though, my fury was steadying itself. sharpening into a weapon I was ready to use. I followed his father into the living room, where his mother was setting out tea, her face lined with worry. She touched my arm gently, asking if something was wrong, but I brushed it off with a smile. "Just missing Ethan," I said, though the words tasted bitter. Sitting between them, I felt the weight of their kindness pressing harder against the lie Ethan had built. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd betrayed them too. We sat together for a while, talking about small things, the garden, the neighbors, the change of seasons. But underneath it, my mind was already racing, mapping out the trap. Ethan thought he was in control, hiding behind excuses, slipping away into the night. He had no idea that his parents were now part of the stage I was setting. And soon, he would have to face not just me, but the very people he used as shields. By the time the sun dipped low, I felt calmer, steadier. I had a plan. I would call him again, but this time, I wouldn't be alone on the other end of the screen. His parents deserved to see what he'd been doing, to hear the lies with their own ears. I looked at them, their faces so open and trusting, and my chest ached. "Would you mind sitting with me for a call later?" I asked softly. They agreed without hesitation. They loved their son, but after tonight, love alone wouldn't be enough. As evening settled in, I sat with his parents on the couch, the glow of a lamp casting soft light around us. My phone felt heavy in my hand, the air charged with anticipation. I dialed his number, my thumb steady, my heart steady too. The ringing seemed to last forever, each tone a drumbeat counting down to the moment of truth. Finally, the screen lit up with his face, still carrying that uneasy smile, still thinking he was one step ahead of me. "Hi, honey," I said sweetly, tilting my head like nothing was wrong. He relaxed just a fraction, enough to let out a nervous breath. "Can you put your parents on? I miss them so much." I watched as his eyes flickered, panic dancing behind them. He started to stammer. "They're asleep, Lauren, I told you." That's when I turned my camera slowly, letting it capture the two people sitting right beside me. "Really?" I asked, my voice calm, almost playful. "Because they're right here with me. Say hello to your son." His mother leaned in, her eyes wide, whispering, "Ethan, what is this?" His father's face darkened, his jaw set tight. "You lied to us. And to her." I stayed silent, letting the weight of their words land. Ethan's face crumbled, his lies unraveling in front of the very people he thought would shield him. And for the first time, I saw fear flash across his eyes. The silence on the call stretched long enough to make my skin prickle. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. For once, the master of excuses had none left. His mother stared at him through the screen, her hand pressed against her lips, while his father leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "Ethan, what have you done?" I didn't have to say a word. The truth was already choking him, and I sat there, steady, watching him unravel. He tried to laugh it off, that nervous chuckle he always used when cornered. "It's not what it looks like," he muttered, eyes darting everywhere but straight ahead. But there was no escape now. "Not what it looks like," his father snapped. "You lied about us being sick. You lied to your wife, and you're still lying now." His mother's eyes glistened, but her voice carried disgust. "How could you, Ethan?" she whispered. I let their judgment fill the room, heavier than anything I could have said. I held the phone steady, my lips curved into the faintest smile. This wasn't just about catching him, it was about letting him face the collapse of his own facade. Every excuse, every cover-up, every lie had led him here, to this moment where even his own family turned against him. I leaned slightly toward the screen and said softly, "They deserve the truth as much as I do." His face paled, sweat shining at his temples, and in that instant, he knew he was cornered. He started fumbling, tripping over his own words. "Lauren, please, you don't understand. I was under stress. I didn't mean for—" His excuses tangled together, pathetic and weak. I could almost see the walls closing in around him. each lie he'd told now pressing hard against his chest. His mother shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You've brought shame into this family," she whispered. His father's jaw clenched, his silence more damning than any words. I stayed calm, my voice steady, deliberate. "You told me your father was sick. You told me your mother begged you to come. And yet here they are, healthy, sitting right next to me." My words cut through the static of his stammering, sharp and cold. He flinched, the screen capturing every ounce of his unraveling. For once, I didn't have to fight to be heard. His own lies were loud enough. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands, desperate now, his voice cracking. I didn't want to hurt you." The irony was almost laughable. My pulse slowed as I stared at him, feeling the power shift completely into my hands. He wasn't the man holding the strings anymore. No, he was the one trapped, stripped bare, his mask falling apart under the weight of his own betrayal, and he knew it. I leaned closer to the camera, letting him see the steadiness in my eyes. "You lied to me, Ethan. You lied to them. And for what? For this?" My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The calm in it was sharper than any scream. His mother pressed her hands together, whispering a prayer under her breath, while his father finally spoke, his tone cutting like steel. "We raised you better than this. You've disgraced us, Ethan." He shook his head violently, desperation spilling out. "It was a mistake, just a mistake. Please, don't make this bigger than it is." His words collapsed as they left his mouth, hollow and meaningless. I stayed quiet, watching his parents' faces harden with every excuse he gave. This wasn't just between us anymore. He was exposed, stripped of every shred of credibility, standing on the thin ice of his own deception. And it was breaking under him fast. As the silence stretched, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The anger was still there, but now it had transformed into something stronger. Resolve. He thought he could twist reality, make me question myself. But now his lies were crumbling in front of the people he least wanted to disappoint. And I wasn't about to let him escape the reckoning that was still to come. This was only the beginning. It was hours later when Ethan finally showed up at his parents' house. The slam of the front door echoed through the hallway, his footsteps heavy, angry, desperate. I stood in the living room beside his parents, steady as a stone, while he burst in like a storm. "Mom, Dad, you don't get it," he said, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. "I was under stress. It didn't mean anything." His excuses spilled out before he even looked at me. His mother's face hardened, her eyes narrowing as she shook her head. "Stress doesn't give you the right to betray your wife, Ethan." Her voice was cold, sharper than I had ever heard before. His father leaned forward, hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "You lied about us being sick," he said firmly, his voice rising with controlled anger. "You dragged our names into your mess. And now you expect us to stand by you?" I watched him falter, his confidence crumbling in the very house he thought he could hide behind. For once, it wasn't just me pointing out his betrayal. It was his own blood, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. I felt their quiet strength beside me, their shame mirroring my own pain. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't just losing me. He was losing the family he'd thought would always protect him. Ethan turned toward me then, his eyes wild, pleading. "Lauren, please, tell them it's not as bad as it looks," he begged, his voice trembling. I held his gaze, unflinching, my arms folded across my chest. "The truth is never as bad as it looks, Ethan. It's worse, and now they finally see it." His mother's hand tightened around mine, silent but full of solidarity. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't standing alone. He tried again, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I was lonely, I was confused, I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Each excuse sounded smaller, weaker, like a child caught with crumbs on his face. His father stood up, towering over him with a fury I'd never witnessed before. "You didn't just hurt her, you humiliated us. You made us part of your lies." The words rang through the room, final and damning. I let the silence hang, heavy and unbreakable. I wanted him to feel the weight of every eye on him, every ounce of disappointment pressing down. "Now you know the truth," I said quietly, looking at his parents. Not at him. "He's been betraying all of us." His mother's lips trembled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. His father gave a single, resolute nod. In that moment, their allegiance shifted, not to their son, but to me. Ethan's face crumpled, his mouth opening and closing like a man drowning. He searched his parents' eyes for a lifeline, but all he found was disappointment. His mother finally spoke, her voice trembling but steady. "You broke her trust, Ethan, and you broke ours too. Do you realize what you've done?" He dropped his gaze, his shoulders sagging, but no apology came, only silence. I stepped forward then, my voice calm, deliberate. "You can lie to me. You can lie to them. But the truth always has a way of standing taller than your excuses." I felt his parents' quiet nods beside me, their weight aligning with mine. For the first time since all this began, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel powerless. I felt seen and stronger than ever. Ethan tried one last time, reaching out as if his hand could erase the mess he'd made. "Lauren, please!" But his father cut him off sharply. "Enough!" The word cracked through the room like a gavel. Ethan froze, his arm falling to his side. I held his gaze, steady and unflinching, already knowing the next step I'd take. He thought he still had power over me. But that illusion was about to shatter. Later that night, he cornered me in the hallway, his face pale, his eyes frantic. "Lauren, please, don't do this. I can change," he begged, his voice hoarse like every word scraped his throat. I stood tall, my arms folded across my chest, and looked at him without flinching. For so long I had given him chances, forgiven his flaws, believed his promises. But now, those promises felt like empty shells scattered at my feet. "Change?" I repeated, my tone colder than I thought myself capable of. "You already decided who you are." His eyes widened, his mouth opening to protest, but I cut him off with a steady gaze. For years I had been the one fighting for us, patching cracks, smoothing over rough edges, and while I was holding us together, he was pulling us apart piece by piece. There was no more room for excuses. Not anymore. He reached for my hand, desperation in every movement. "You can't just walk away," he pleaded, his voice cracking, echoing in the narrow hallway. I pulled my hand back before his fingers could touch mine. The air between us grew sharp, heavy with the truth neither of us could ignore. "Watch me," I said, each word deliberate, final. In his eyes, I saw the realization sink in. His control over me was gone, and he would never get it back. He stumbled after me, his words tumbling out like a broken record. "We can fix this, Lauren. We can start over. I'll be better, I promise." His voice cracked with each desperate syllable, but promises meant nothing to me anymore. I'd heard them before, soft words followed by betrayal. My heart no longer bent under the weight of his pleas. Instead, it stood tall, braced with the steel of every lie he'd told. I stopped at the foot of the stairs, turning slowly to face him. "Pack your things," I said quietly, but my tone left no room for argument. He froze, his eyes widening as if he couldn't believe I had the strength to say it. "I won't share my life with a liar," I added, every syllable landing with the weight of finality. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. For once, Ethan had no words left to twist. Behind me, I felt his parents' presence, silent, solemn witnesses to the end of what once was. His mother's eyes brimmed with sorrow, not just for me, but for the son she barely recognized anymore. His father's jaw was tight, his silence speaking louder than any rebuke. Ethan stood caught between us all, abandoned by the very people he thought he could count on. And in that moment, he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The silence stretched until it pressed against my skin, heavy and unrelenting. Ethan shifted his weight, searching for words that no longer existed between us. His eyes darted from me to his parents, as if hoping someone would step in, shield him, rescue him from this reckoning. But no one moved. His mother looked away, his father crossed his arms, and I stood there, unyielding. He was alone, truly alone, and he finally seemed to realize it. I turned toward the staircase, my back to him, my voice steady as I spoke over my shoulder. This is the last time you'll ever have power over me. My hand slid along the railing as I climbed, each step pulling me further away from the man I no longer recognized. Behind me, his voice broke into a desperate cry, but it no longer pierced me. The sound was hollow, stripped of its hold, fading into the background like a song I'd stopped believing in. At the top of the stairs, I paused, my chest rising and falling with a calm I hadn't felt in months. I could still hear him down below, but his words no longer mattered. What mattered was the choice I had made, the choice to walk away, to reclaim my life. I whispered it softly, more to myself than anyone else. I'm done. And with that, I stepped into the quiet of my room, closing the door on him, on us, and on the life he had shattered. Weeks passed, and with them, the storm inside me began to clear. At first, the silence felt strange, almost too wide, like I'd stepped into an empty house that used to be full. But slowly, I found comfort in it. I woke each morning without the weight of suspicion pressing down on my chest. My days became mine again, quiet cups of coffee, long walks, laughter with friends who reminded me who I really was. The freedom felt like fresh air after being trapped underground. News of Ethan trickled back to me through mutual friends. Word was his double life had caught up to him at work. The company discovered his lies and misconduct, and just like that, his career collapsed. His reputation, once polished and proud, was in ruins. Even the woman whose voice had sliced through our call had abandoned him. He was left with nothing but the wreckage he'd built with his own hands. And me? I flourished. I redecorated the house, filling it with colors I loved, pieces that reflected me, not us. I reclaimed the space that once echoed with his absence and made it whole again. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit inside someone else's story. I was writing my own, and every day I felt stronger, lighter, more alive. I started taking back the little rituals that once felt lost to me. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table, Sunday mornings with music playing while I cooked, evenings curled up with a book instead of waiting for his call. Each habit was a quiet declaration that I no longer lived in his shadow. I was creating a life that reflected me, my choices, my joy, my strength. The house, once heavy with secrets, began to feel lighter, warmer, mine. Friends noticed the change too. "You look different," one of them said over lunch. "Happier, brighter." I smiled, realizing she was right. There was a glow in my reflection I hadn't seen in years, a light born, not from someone else's love, but from my own resilience. I'd thought his betrayal would break me, but instead, it became the spark that set me free. That irony wasn't lost on me. It felt almost poetic. At night, I sometimes replayed the last look on his face, the shock, the humiliation, the moment he realized the lies had finally caught up to him. And instead of pain, I felt peace. I didn't need revenge in the way he might have expected. His own actions had undone him. And me? I was still standing, stronger for having walked through the fire. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the mirror while arranging a vase of tulips. For the first time in a long while, I didn't see the woman who had been betrayed. I saw someone who had rebuilt herself piece by piece, someone who had chosen dignity over desperation. A smile tugged at my lips as I whispered to myself, "He thought I couldn't live without him, but look at me now." The words carried no bitterness, only truth. The news about Ethan kept coming, each update worse than the last. Fired from his job, ostracized by colleagues, and abandoned by the woman he had risked everything for. His fall was public, messy, and final. And though I hadn't lifted a finger to ruin him, justice had a way of weaving its own path. His downfall was his doing, and it freed me from carrying any more of his weight. As I stood by the window that evening, golden light spilling across the room, I felt a deep calm settle in my chest. the kind of calm that comes only after surviving a storm and realizing you're still whole. I didn't just survive, I grew. I built a life that was mine, one that no lie could take away. And in that moment, I knew I hadn't lost anything at all. I had gained everything I truly needed, myself.